Hi friends, this is the $50 wallet video. You'll only have one sheet of pattern pieces and they are mostly dimensional, so I measured my pieces and wrote my dimensions on the paper. The only piece that I made a template for is the curved piece, so I just laid my plastic on, drew with a Sharpie, and cut it out. And then on my vinyl, all the pieces are the same width, so I was able to use one strip. I just did my dimensions and then I used my template for the curved piece. And then for the ID holder, I just measured in the amount that the pattern was and drew the box. And then the same for my cork. I just did a couple of contrasting pieces. So I'm doing the frame and the curved pocket as contrasting. And then the back and my two rectangle pocket pieces are on the red. I have a piece of 12 gauge vinyl. It's plenty thick enough. Let's cut to the size of the dimensions that the pattern states, and I'll use that with the cork wallet. And then with the vinyl wallet, I will use this is a sheet, well it was a sheet, of baseball card holders. So it would be, I think it's like 3 rows long and 3 rows wide. So you can tell I use these a lot for card holders. But don't just cut one square yet, because for the size of this, I'll show you how to cut that and get the proper cut that we want to use. And I'll use that with the vinyl wallet. So we just want to start, after you've got your pieces drawn, we just want to cut out. So I'll cut everything out real quick. This is a nice gentle curve, so I'm going to use my rotary cutter. If you need to, you can use your scissors. You can use your scissors for all the pieces if you'd like to. So there's our curved pocket. Then I'm going to straighten up this one side of the ID pocket. It's just a little crooked. Then I'm going to use my rotary cutter and my ruler, and I'm going to cut on the straight lines, staying away from the corners, just so I get a nice clean straight cut. And then I'll come back and show you how I do the corners. And I'm cutting directly on the lines. If you want a smaller window, you can make a smaller window. If you don't want a window at all and you just want to put a thumb hole, you can do that with a punch. And then you can slip your ID in there. Your ID will be hidden, but you have that thumb hole to pull it out. You can also use this in the clear vinyl, which I'll be doing on this one. Or you can just cut a smaller box and leave it open. You don't have to put any vinyl. I wouldn't leave it open if it was this size box, just because you don't want your ID to shift and fall out of such a large hole. So I would make sure that it's a little bit smaller. You can also use the vinyl packaging from your linens to cut a piece of vinyl. You can use a sandwich bag. If your sandwich bag seems really thin, you can use 2 or even 3 layers of that sandwich bag. Alright, so I've got my straight cuts on all 4 sides. I'm going to come back with my extra sharp, extra pointy scissors. I'm going to snip to the corner, and then I'm going to rotate in that corner. So if you can see, I snip to the corner, and then I'm taking my scissors and rotating. So I get deep in that corner, lining up with the long cut and finish that snip. Now I have a cleanly cut corner and I don't have any snip marks. So if I were to snip to this corner and then turn and snip out the rest, one of my sides will have a snip mark left in it, and we don't want that. So we snip to our corner, turn, and finish. Snip to our corner, turn, and finish. And one more time. Alright, now you have your ID frame with no snip marks on your corners. And finish cutting these pieces out. Trying to decide how I want that scrap to be. So I think I'll cut around the box. And then although I have a funny shaped scrap, in case I need a longer strip or need a chunky piece, I'll be able to get either piece out of it. Just toss that in the scrap bin. Okay, so I have a back, a pocket, a frame, a curved pocket, my main piece, and then my vinyl. Now, on this wallet, it's meant to fold in half, so you will have a strip of your backing sticking here. If that bothers you, you can cut another main piece, put them together wrong sides together, and then treat that as one piece moving forward. I don't mind the black here, although I marked my piece right in the middle and I shouldn't have. But we'll fix that right now. It's just chalk. And this is just a alcohol wipe. I'll just take that chalk off real quick. And we're good as new. Luckily on this ink one, I marked it up high enough that we'll be okay. So I'm finished cutting out my vinyl here. And I am going to cut off this pink line because I'll be able to see that smidgen of it in the center when we fold it. There we go. I could take that off with the alcohol too, but it takes a little more effort than the chalk. So I'll just trim it off instead. The rest of these pieces are going to be face down. So we'll be fine with the lines. And then cut the curve. Righty. And we need to cut out that ID square the same way. I'll do this one a little faster because I already showed you. Again, this is another pattern that if you have a cutting machine, you can screenshot the PDF, load it into your software and clean up the image, load it onto your canvas, and then resize it so that that 1 inch square equals 1 inch on your canvas, and that'll put these pieces the size they need to be. Send it to your Cricut and it will cut out those frames and that curve perfectly for you. Your Cricut or your what else is there? Brother Scan and Cut, and there's another one that I'm not thinking of. Starts with an S, I think. Silhouette? Is that right? Obviously, I use a Cricut, so I don't know. But I believe the softwares work the same in that respect. So there's our frame. All right, to cut the baseball card holders, you'll notice there's a melted seam that runs up and down, and then there's a seam that runs this way. So you can just cut out one of the squares on the seams. And so we kind of have a slip pocket. And you can use that just as it is, and you'll have 2 layers of plastic, or you can go and sort of slit the edges and separate it if you just want 1 layer. I'm going to just use the 2 layers. We'll just lay that on the back of your ID holder. I'll clip this up here and then I'll show you. Right. So you'll notice that it's not as long, but it is wider, and that's perfectly fine because we're going to trim it down. And we're just going to top stitch 1/8 inch from this window. So the way that this wallet is used is you put your ID in from the long side, so we aren't going to be able to use the pocket feature. If we were using it up and down to where we slipped our ID in from this side, I'd show you how you could actually use the pocket itself, but it won't work out with this wallet. Just making sure that that's flat on there and no bubbles. And then if you are using just the clear vinyl, you just put that on, put your packet, or I'm sorry, your frame on top. It's slippery. And then this should be about the exact length of your frame, and then it's a little wider, and again we're going to trim it down, and we'll top stitch 1/8 inch from the inner edge. So we'll do that on both pieces. Making sure your needle is traveling back up before you pivot. Now we are trimming that clear plastic down after we stitch it. So if it starts to shift, you'll be okay if it doesn't stay perfectly straight. What's important is that your frame stays flat, even if your plastic kind of shifts crooked. Make sure you don't have any bubbles in your frame stitching. Remembering to back stitch where you began. So I'll show you from the back side. top stitched around, and then you have this extra clear plastic that we're going to trim off. This vinyl can get a little sticky on my machine bed. Sticking to the metal. To combat that, you can put a piece of tissue paper under the free edge and it'll flow. But it's such a small piece here that I'm just going to struggle with it a little bit. Just going to take some duckbill scissors. They have a bend to them, and then the bottom scissor is kind of that pie shape. I'm just going to trim this vinyl back all the way around so that it's not going to be in my raw edges. And I've got about 1/8 of an inch of space away from the seam. Alright, so now my fingernails are on the clear edge, and then my top stitch is a little bit further in. So I'll just do the same thing to the baseball card holder. You can absolutely do this with regular scissors. I just like these duck bills because I know I'm not going to catch anything that I don't want to catch. Alright, so now this one has just a double layer of film, but you can see it's still not obtrusive. And again, I'm just about 1/8 inch away from my top stitching. If you want to put a thumb hole into your ID window, after we've top stitched and trimmed, this is the time that you would do that. And I'm going to use a punch. This is a leather punch, and I just whack it with a hammer. You could easily just fold this in half and trim yourself a little curve. You could use a household object that is in the shape that you like, trace it, and cut it out with scissors. I'm just going to use the grid on my mat to sort of find the center. I'm going to place that punch sort of centrally. Well, this is another one of those eyeball deals. I am using the grid, but I'm not measuring anything and being super precise. This will be loud, so feel free to pause or turn the volume down. You got that perfect oval. So that you can grasp and slide your ID out. Now we are putting our ID in from the long side. So if you're using an oval, you might want to turn it the opposite direction. But I just went with the matching the way that the pattern flows. So the long rectangle is this way, so I put the long oval that way. Well, there's still a little bit of space there that you can grab it and slide it out. And then you just use this piece when you put together your sandwich. Right now we just want to top stitch all of our pocket pieces. That's an optional step. So I'll do that on the long side of my ID pocket. I'll do that on the curve of my curved pocket. And then on my back piece and my pocket piece, I will do it on one of the long edges. Your back piece is going to be under your ID frame. So you may not see that top stitching, but you are creating two pockets because you'll have your ID and then you'll have a pocket. So you might want to top stitch that just for a little bit of prettiness. I'll just go ahead and top stitch mine. All right, you might be finished with your pieces. I'm starting my second set here. I don't like that edge. I noticed that the baseball card didn't stick to my machine bed at all, and the 12 gauge vinyl did. So that might be another reason to choose a different item than the vinyl. I'm just going to quickly clip all my threads here. All right, now we can start building our sandwiches. So we have our main piece. We're going to lay that face down. And you want to put your pocket back down first. And then your full pocket on the other side. They'll be the same size. You want to put your ID window down. You want your top stitching on all of your pieces to go toward the center. You're matching up the raw edges, and then you'll put your curved pocket. And those shifted on me as I caught that clip. And there we go. So your final stitching on these is only going to be through 3 layers at the most at one time. I just must have cut this piece all kinds of crookedness. Because now I'm trimming the bottom edge too. And you have an option here. You can stop and start here, go around, stop and start, and then do your second piece. Or, because I want my top stitching to go all the way around, I'm going to do the whole thing at one time. And I'll stop and start in the center of one of the folded, where the fold will go. So let me make my other sandwich here. Again, I've got my full pocket with the top stitching toward the center. My ID pocket is on top with the top stitch edge toward the center. All right, my full pocket, top stitching toward the center, and my curved pocket with the curve toward the center. We have a really high heat index today. We actually had like an air quality warning this morning. Everybody's supposed to stay inside. Today is my day off work, so I didn't go and check my work emails to see, but when I was at work yesterday, she said they're probably not going to go past noon because our AC is actually out on the first floor of our library. So with our heat index at like between 105 and 110, they're probably going to close the library. And I'm only mentioning it because I'm noticing my lights flickering in my house. So I'm wondering if we're going to lose electricity in a minute. So, alright, so I've got my cork sandwich and my vinyl sandwich, and I'm going to stitch them both the same way. I'm going to stitch from the outside because that is the outside and that's where you'll see the pretty stitches first. If your bobbin and your needle make slightly different stitches and you don't like the way your bobbin looks, you might want to do that. And it calls for a 1/4 inch stitch, and I'm just going to check here that I have plenty of space for 1/4 inch stitching on each side, and I do. Use your stiletto if you need to. I'm going to put that away so I don't hurt myself. That was my seam ripper end. And most of the time, when I'm coming up, because I'm stitching this way, and then I come up that pocket, I'll just run this under it toward the foot to keep it flat, and then I can press it down right on that corner as I'm getting up toward the needle. I didn't need to use my stiletto on the cork because it's pretty thin and it went through nicely. Alright, so I'm coming up. I finished this side of the pocket and I'm coming to the center. So I'm just going to swoosh underneath and hold that pocket in place. As I was coming up to that needle, just so it didn't tuck under the wrong way right at the end. Oops. I went too far on that last stitch. I'm just going to rework it here. There we go. And back stitch where you started. I got a stray thread caught in my stitching over here, so we'll just remove that. Alright, so we stitch all the way around. You are more than welcome to top stitch from your inside if that makes you feel more comfortable. And then you can trim your edges if you need to, so that they all mount each other. And then we're just going to check that all our pockets are good. And then we have another perfect little gift holder. I'm gonna go ahead and put my vinyl sandwich together. Right, so I've got my final one together. And that's with the 2 layers of baseball card holder. I'm never going to be able to say that properly. So you can still see that it's still perfectly clear even though it's 2 layers, but it's still strong and sturdy. And then I'll trim my edges. And this one I will paint with edge paint. And then this one I will just do with Mod Podge to give it a clear sealed edge. All right, so there's our $50 wallet. Another fun, quick stocking stuffer. Especially with this cork one, how thin it is. It's still really sturdy even though I say that it's thin. So don't freak out and think, oh, I don't want to do it in cork because it's too thin. It's nice that it's thin, but it's still sturdy and durable. And that will fit in a gift card, or I'm sorry, like a greeting card envelope with the greeting card and then your gift card inside. And that's a fun little gift, and you don't have to do a whole bunch of like wrapping and a gift bag and all that. It's even thin enough, I bet it'll send in the mail. And it'll probably fit in a greeting card flat. That'll be a really nice handmade item to send in the mail in a greeting card, and you don't have to pay shipping for a package. I really like it. I can't stop looking at it. All right, that's it for our $50 wallet. And if you are continuing on with us, we'll see you in a minute.